So that brought to mind some of my CPE, or clinical pastoral education, some of the processes that I learned by, or chaplains learn through and learn clinical. CPE being clinical pastoral education, typically you start out with a extended unit for 6 months, or you can do a summer unit. Then you move into a residency, and if you're serious about becoming a chaplain, you will stay for a fellowship and you will specialize. I was one of the very few that decided to do 3 years instead of just the 2. And all 3 of my years were in palliative and hospice. But through this training, and I bring this up because of the beard, it reminded me of going through CPE. In the hospital systems, private or government or for-profit or for nonprofit, to become a chaplain, as you go through CPE, we are the only discipline that is process-oriented. And what I mean by that is a term that we use going through this is action, reflection, action model. So we do an action, then we reflect, and then we take it to the group and reflect. And then with that feedback, those changes, the knowledge that we gain, opening up the Johari window, the things that we do that we don't know, we go back in and try again. As I mentioned, there's no other discipline that does this. It's usually with the disciplines, it's just you learn and you trial and error, and you're not really going back to a group and processing what you thought, what you felt, what you did good, what you did bad, and how it affects you personally. Because what that does is it drills to the core of who you are and why you act the way that you act, so that when you get into the rooms and situations that trigger you, you are aware and you are able to stop that triggering enough to be able to listen and be present. And I chose this because I wanted to go through the title first, and presence is the last part of the title. But I thought, as I was doing this action, reflection, action, I thought this would be important so that you'll understand why and how I explain things, what I look for in the room, my experiences, how I interact with different team members, because I'm different with the doctors than I am with the nurses, than I am with the psychologist or the psychiatrists or the nurse practitioners or the social workers, because they're asking different things from a different perspective for the whole person. And I like to think of chaplaincy as the icing on the cake, because not only do I learn the medical terminology, knowledge, and all of that, but I also have the social services outside of what the hospital offers. And I also do counseling as well. And so you can see my perspective is multifaceted. And that comes from the action, reflection, action model. So as I've been going through these years, when I was a youth minister, I used to tell the youth, if you always do what you've always done, you'll always get what you always got. So how's that working for you? And see, CPE, it addresses that. Some people will call that insanity, doing the same thing and expecting a better result. But in this, you're looking at yourself and your perspective in order to gain control over that. Paul writes about, in Corinthians, about how we're supposed to train. We do not practice boxing, beating in the air. We train and we discipline ourselves, because that's what a disciple does. So you begin to see how this action, reflection, action model would actually fit into this. and that it's more biblical than you could really imagine. And it is extremely difficult to do. To look at yourself and your shortcomings, because Paul writes again, he tells us to look into the mirror soberly and question whether we have salvation or not. And he does that to remind us that we need to look inside ourselves, because that's where the sinful nature is. And we need to be aware of that, not only for our own sanctification and justification, but how we treat other people. You see, this is why this action, reflection, action is so important. We can take my beard, for example. Never had one before in my life, and you'll notice in the first two episodes that I had it. And it was, as I mentioned, the reason for this particular YouTube channel is for me. I am continuing that action, reflection, action, and I want you to see that as we go through more episodes so that you would have an idea, perhaps you'd want to try that. Now, yes, we'll talk about family systems, motivational interviewing, and other techniques and things that are out there. But the heart of it is action, reflection, action. So growing this out, it was not really a pain. I enjoyed it, but I didn't like how it looked. So I grew it, which is the action. Tried my best to take care of it, go and have it trimmed, all of the things that you do. But as I'm listening to people that I work with, how patients and families encounter me, how staff encounters me, I've been reflecting on it over the past month. And I came to the conclusion that perhaps having a beard is good, but perhaps not having it is long. So you see, I'm living out that action, reflection, action model. And I know sometimes you will and not realize you're doing that. And that's what I wanted to point out before we start talking about presence. And we'll do that in the next episode. But I think this is the basis for teaching all chaplains to be able to sit in the room and the suffering and the pain takes time. In that action, reflection, action model, we bring back the feelings, the anxieties, the fears, the angers, the triggers, and we lay them bare on the table, and we poke and prod them, and we look at them, and we ask why, and how, and what should we do? Why don't we try? Have you considered this? From this perspective, it may be different. Do you see why it's so valuable for the action, reflection, action model? It took me a long time to be able to do that, years. As I told you, I did 3 years of clinical training, more than most, because I didn't feel like I was ready to go on my own yet. When I was younger, I was abused by my brother, my older brother. And as I was going through my first year, I was on the hospice unit. And it was a gentleman who was the same age as my brother. With many of the same things in his past, he was abusive. And as I sat down with him and we processed, there's nothing else we can do medically. Well, how now will we live the rest of our life is my first question. And then as the story became revealed, I was triggered because I was in the same situation, but I was on the receiving end. So I'm not going to go into detail what happened and all of that. That's irrelevant. But what is relevant is I was able to take that action, reflection, action model. Although it took me some time to get back into the room, there was time for me to understand how and why I was triggered. And this is very important, especially when you're going into the room, for example, in a family meeting, and we have a number of attendings, hey, look, there's nothing else we can do, but we haven't told them yet. We're going to leave that to you and your team. That's hard to do, and it's easy to get triggered. And we'll talk about family meetings and those things further down the line, because I want to bring other people into this, and so you can see all the different perspectives and how chaplaincy fits into that. But back with that experience, even though it was difficult for me to talk about, and it took several weeks going through classes in the CPE classroom and being challenged, being pushed, being supported, being encouraged to work through those triggers and those things and the situations in. No, I didn't share details with the people that I was, the 5 other people I was going through the program with in any of the 3 years. That was personal to me. And those were things I was not ready to share. I've had a therapist for years, and it took time for me to heal from all of that. But even with the therapist, it was action, reflection, action model. As I would bring things and poke and prod and be challenged, I was motivated to try a different perspective. Self-regulating, self-breathing, self-help, all of those things were action, reflection, action. After doing them, we reflect and we take what we've learned and now apply it, and our Johari window becomes smaller and smaller. And if you're not familiar with the Johari window, it's what you do that you don't see or understand, that others on the outside come in and explain and show, and we work on that action, reflection, action model. So you see why this is so important and why I'm chasing this rabbit doing this. Because for me to talk about presence, to be present is a difficult thing to do, and you have to not only have a demeanor for it, but you need to be trained for it. You're never really ready. With more experience and time and different situations, you become a little more wiser and can navigate through it. But it never takes the difficulty away, ever. It's going to be difficult, and that's just the way that it is. But you begin to see my passion in this, because this is extremely biblical. And for me to grow in my walk with Christ, I have to do this action, reflection, action. Book of James, chapter 1, verse 2. When trials of many type come, consider it pure joy. How do you consider it pure joy when you're going through every type of trial that ever could be? Because those things work on your perseverance. And when that works complete, your patience. When that works complete, you are mature, lacking in nothing. So you see this path of sanctification and justification. And because it's spiritual focused and it's pastoral, CPE does that. And other disciplines do not do that. Not because they won't, or most of them don't understand that. And so when you start working with a chaplain, you begin to learn those terms and what that looks like. Because many times, for example, after a family meeting, I'll pull off the fellow and we process. And sometimes they don't even know that's going on. We'll discuss how that works in a later episode. But you begin to see the basis of how this action, reflection, action is used, can be used, and how it helps mature chaplains to go deeper and further. Questions that we ask can be anything. And most of the questions that we ask usually come from whatever the patient or family bring to light. It also helps chaplains be curious. Tell me more. So how does that help you in this situation? Because this is different than the other ones that you've used this perspective in. So you see how that action, reflection, action helps me get into the room, helps me go into the deep conversations, and helps them, perhaps, my goal in the long term, if you want to call it long term, is for them to look at their perspective and perhaps change that. Maybe. I'm not going to force them. I'm going to be curious. I'm going to be supportive. I'm going to be loving. I am going to do my best to love them as Christ said. To love somebody is to put their needs before your own. That's biblical love. That's the true definition of love. So all of that CPE training, the calling and the personality that God gave me, those things all come together and are formed, just like on Jeremiah, the potter. When Jeremiah was told to go watch the potter, then he would give him the word. And it talks about how the potter, using his hands, is forming the clay. That's exactly what's happening with action, reflection, action. So this is how I can tell you this is biblical, and it is Christ-centered, and it helps us see, not with these eyes, but with these eyes. Because it's these eyes I have to go into the room or meet with the family or even the staff, not these eyes. These take in information, yes, but it's these eyes that let me see how they feel, how they react, what their mood is, how they're handling things, and it helps me be curious in and out of the room. And these things I even use with the staff. Most of the time they don't even know I'm doing it. Most of the time they're, it's just the chaplain. Well, chaplain, you're supposed to listen to me. Yes, I am. So how's it doing? And you see how that works, that listening, taking in, processing, bringing out. Doesn't mean you're going to be able to do it the first time, and maybe not even by the 100th time. But it's the process that we go through. And again, I draw it towards sanctification for those that are in Christ. So you can begin to understand why chaplains belong in the hospital. They belong in the interdisciplinary team. They belong in the family meetings. They belong in the room when the news is bad. They belong in the room at end of life. They belong in the room before the information's given to them. Because those things that I've learned and experienced and I take into the room, I help them do the same thing in a safe environment, slowly, one step at a time. Because we're told we don't have tomorrow. We're not guaranteed that. Yesterday's already gone, and there's nothing I can do about yesterday. All I have is today. What am I going to do today? And I go back to, if you always do what you've always done, you'll always get what you've always got. I don't want to live that way. I don't want to treat my patients, family, or staff that way. So my heart has to be open, which is why I look through these eyes. Because this is the throne that Christ sits on, is my heart. I take in everything with my eyes and my ears. And it is the old adage, you have 2 ears and 1 mouth, so you should listen twice as much than you speak. And I think that's what chaplains do the best. Listen. They hear, but the hearing, you hear what they're saying. But to listen, to feel, to see that, the emotion, the raw emotion, the anger, the disappointment, the broken relationships, makes my heart hurt. And I get very passionate with that. And that's the hardest part of being a chaplain. Knowing that those are broken and hoping beyond hope and through prayer to reconcile. But that comes with time. And that's another topic and another episode. So this is my heart on this. And if you're watching this, this is what's important. This is the motivation that I go into the room with. I've been called by God, confirmed by a congregation, trained with other folks, other chaplains, most of them all much wiser than me, much more experienced than me, helping me, lifting each other up, processing, hurting, explaining, helping. All of those things happen in the action, reflection, action model. And through this, it has changed my life, not only as a chaplain, but also as a husband and a father and a church member, and just as a citizen of this great nation. And I'm hoping these are the things that you see in episodes to come. Because this is the original foundation and building block. Other than Jesus Christ as my Lord and Savior, this is the next block. And this block is the basis on how I go into rooms, how I see things, how I process things, so that you'll have an idea. And I know if any of you are watching and in the medical field, there's not a lot of that done. They'll talk about, for example, in nursing, issues. It'll get quiet, people will be frustrated, and they'll suggest something and the dynamics. It's different with CPE. In the clinical pastoral education, I'm allowed to have those feelings. I'm allowed to express those feelings in a safe environment. And the others around me, let's look at this for what it is. Not to attack, but to understand. And hopefully to change and grow, which is the point of CPE. I should walk out, I don't want to say better, more compassionate, more attuned to whom I'm walking and I am ministering to. Because if I'm attuned to that, I will be much more successful in building a bridge, which we're going to talk about bridge building. Oh, we're going to have many episodes on that. To support, to lift up, to prepare. Oh, I could talk about preparing just straight through for hours. And that's in order. And I don't want to jump ahead and chase other rabbits. But I thought this was so important that I wanted to break the episode numbers and put this in so that you'll understand when I did the first one and introduced myself why I'm doing this and why this is important. And my prayer for you, if you're watching this, I'm hoping that you watch other episodes. If you subscribe, that's wonderful. If you make a comment, that's wonderful. I'll read it, and if I can incorporate it, it will. But I'm hoping that you watch with an open mind and an open heart. Because as I've explained, I want to get better at what I do. And I believe that being able to express and share these experiences and thoughts and trials and errors and action, reflection, action, that I can become better, that I can be more compassionate, I can be more attuned to everything going on. That is my hope. That is my prayer for you if you continue to watch this. I invite you, but again, the choice is always yours. I will never solicit or ask for. If you wish to engage and interact, I'm available. If not, that's fine too. Thank you. Thank you for staying all the way to the end of this. Thank you for listening to the passion that's inside of me for this. Thank you, because I know there are a million other things that you can do rather than listen to this. And again, my prayer is that this helps you as well. I want to thank you again, and we will see you in the next episode.